A commission like this has to be show-stopping. The guitars that I aspire to build hold storytelling at the forefront of their identity, celebrating materials for their connection, their heritage, and their performance. I was commissioned to build a piece that upheld this brief in its finest form. This video is the result of that vision, and my client has allowed me the creative freedom to document every single part of this guitar's conception. I will take you through my beloved craft, my processes, my materials, to show you a full guitar being made from start to finish. I'll even include the hand delivery, where I took the instrument to Florida to present to its new custodian. I can't wait to show you guys. I always begin with the back and sides selection process. Not only do the back and sides dictate the color palette of the instrument, but it also has a huge impact on the tonal performance depending on what species you pick. I knew exactly what kind of wood I wanted to use for this build. It's a good tonal all-rounder, but its heritage is where the real magic happens. And for me in particular, it's extra special. I was born in a flat fenland region of the UK called Norfolk, and only a few kilometres down the road from where I began my life, so too did the tree that I'm using for this guitar. The key difference is, I was born in the 1990s. This tree was born a few years before that, in the Neolithic period, and it stood tall, according to its carbon dating, around 5,000 years ago. When sea levels rose all of those years ago, in the flat fenland regions of the United Kingdom, peat bogs were formed. These swampy pools of water were completely free of oxygen. And so any tree around that time that had been felled by natural causes thus fell into the peat bogs, preserved in the oxygen-free conditions. This meant that they could not decompose, but as well as that, over time, the tannins in the wood reacted and turned this beautiful shade of black. Significantly nearer to the time I was born, a farmer came along with his big industrial equipment and hit this tree underneath the soil that he was planning on probably making into a potato field. Now, if you've ever had the pleasure of taking a walk through the English countryside, you will see many an oak tree, and again, Neolithic England was no different, so this species of wood is oak. As a very British person and somebody who grew on very similar terrain to this tree, I felt so connected with this material as a good choice for a back and sides set. And this is where I'd like to begin the building process, with the sides. The first thing I do with my sides is to thickness them. Guitar making is such a tactile craft, and I never underestimate my hands when it comes to being my most valuable tool. I'll use the drum sander for this because it's a lot less aggressive on delicate timber. Plain blades have a habit of tearing out detailed figuring, and I just don't want to risk that with this build. Just a little note here, I have Tourette syndrome, so if you see me hop or do anything a bit strange, that's not part of guitar making. Just in case, I had to clarify that. Anyway, onwards. Once the sides are thicknessed, the best thing to do next is to make sure you have marked everything out properly. I call this idiot proofing because as an idiot at times, sometimes I really amaze myself with how silly I can be. These markings will let me know which the show side is, so which side of the wood is going to be on the outside of the guitar, but also where the top, the upper bout, the waist, the lower bout, and the end will fall. When it comes to different guitar designs, all curves fall in a separate place, so it's really important to make sure, for my design, that I have them in the right place. Now, this next bit did not go to plan, and I really think it's so important to keep that stuff in. Nobody ever gets anything 100% when you're building something as detailed as a guitar, and I think that's a beautiful thing about the craft. And here's a prime example of something that did not go right. I got this side bender from the USA, and I'm in the UK, and I didn't know the rules around transformers, even though StewMac did tell me. Subsequently, although I've used this kind of jig a few times during my apprenticeships, the first time I fired it up was for this build. Because the voltages were off, it just got a lot hotter than it should have done, and very luckily, nothing happened to the timber. It just relaxed a lot quicker than I was expecting. Not before the fire alarm went off though, so apologies if you were one of those people in my building who had to evacuate. Watching the footage back, it was actually very funny because it looked like a comedy sketch. Me running around the place trying to make sure nothing set on fire and also unplugging everything at lightning speed. But here we are, I've got the transformer now, and for the next side that I bent, it was all calm. Now once the sides are bent, it's time to get the mould involved. The mould is the foundation point for the instrument. We're going to use it as our template to get the shape properly accurate. We want the sides to be as beautifully fitted to this mould as possible, so I'll commence a process of using a square and a plane to achieve this. Although this is trickier than it looks, it is very satisfying when you make the top and the bottom fit each other exactly. Now, the head block and the tail block are very important structural components in an acoustic guitar. I choose to use a wood called cedrela for my head and tail blocks. That's because I find it matches the durability of mahogany whilst being as lightweight as cedar. As you can see, we're working with end grain here, and end grain, as we all know, absorbs water like a bunch of straws. There is no water in epoxy, and that makes it a good candidate for durability and reliability. Again, the mould makes life a lot easier here because I trace the contours of the guitar shape to that head block and tail block directly, meaning that when I glue them in, the curves are going to be perfect. Now, while that's gluing up, it's time to get started on our neck. The first thing I'm going to do is lovingly plane this mahogany up by hand. I love this part because I get to start with this very raw looking plank of mahogany, and I've got to turn it into a beautifully smooth, carved and delicate neck that will facilitate my client's hands in the making of music. I just tried to explain the scarf joint in terms of simple English, and I found it very difficult, so I'm just going to let you watch the process of the scarf joint, and then once you've seen it, I'll tell you what I did. So, as you saw, I marked out what was a 15-degree angle on the side of my neck blank. I chopped it with a bandsaw, and then I planed up the surfaces to make sure all of them were smooth. I then took that excess offcut and pasted it onto the back of the existing billet. Subsequently, we have a neck with a 15-degree angle on it, which will become our headstock. Although I make sure the joint is absolutely perfect, what I'm going to do is inlay some carbon fibre so we can be sure that our neck has the best chance of making it in the wild. I'm going to use the router table for this, and while I'm at it, I'm going to route that slot for the truss rod. The next part of the neck is actually something I kind of dread because it's actually very difficult to achieve. What we're going to do is install a volute onto this guitar. I like to see the volute as a little roller coaster fun for your thumb next to the nut at the end of the neck. It's a really nice tactile interaction with the instrument when you run your thumb up and round, but also it provides a bit of structural integrity to that nut area which sits on the break point. Now, to make the volute look extra pretty, I'm going to add an ebony backstrap on it. Bending this piece of ebony for the backstrap is the thing that I'm talking about when I say I dread it. I find ebony quite difficult to bend in this form, but thankfully nothing went wrong in this particular instance. Now we have a neck blank well on its way, let's return back to those sides. And a few of you have asked me questions about the way I build my guitar sides because it is a little bit unusual. That being said, a lot of luthiers are moving towards this way of building, especially in the handmade community. Now, I build with what are called structured sides. And of course, there is no one way of doing anything, so this is the way that I've picked. But of course, I'm very open to the fact that some people don't build like this, and that's okay too. My thinking behind my structured sides is this. The way I build my guitars is very reliant upon the voicing of the top, which we'll get into later. In my mind, the top is the thing that resonates and is able to move around and produce the most sound when it comes to the instrument. And for that top to resonate to its full potential in the way that I design that bracing pattern, I need a really rigid structure that top is glued to, so that it has a reliable platform on which to move. If you imagine one of the most resonant instruments out there, which is the drum, they use the same structure. They'll have a very stiff rim assembly or side, and they will have an animal skin which reverberates on top. I've been really happy with the sound of the guitars that I've produced using these structured sides, so that is why I use them today. It's also worth noting that I'll add a veneer over the top of the structured sides, which just looks beautifully clean when you look through the sound hole. In order to assemble these components, I will use a vacuum bag. Very exciting bit of tech here. It's essentially just a fantastic way of clamping things up really tight. I've got a mold which conforms exactly to the shape of my guitars, and I will layer up the layers like a cake, and when the vacuum turns on, it will suck them into place. What I will be left with is a beautifully accurate guitar side. Now we have our two sides, we can pop in the head block and the tail block. Now I should talk about radiuses because, contrary to what I believed before I started guitar making, the back and the top of a guitar are not flat. They have very subtle radiuses on them. The top radius is 40 foot and the back radius is 15 foot. If you imagine a massive 40-foot sphere and then you throw some clay at it, wait for the clay to set and pull the clay away, you'll end up with a very subtle curve that follows that sphere. Obviously very subtle because it's such a big sphere. The way we install a radius is with a radius dish. So if you go back to that clay example again, basically I have a CNC'd piece of MDF with that curve in it. What I do is sand the rim assembly into the dish, which makes it take on the form of the radius exactly. It's worth noting that my guitars are also skinnier at the heel than they are at the bottom of the guitar. Subsequently, it's a bit of a complex mathematical situation trying to figure out the exact side taper of the measurement at the top and the bottom versus the radius. Don't worry yourself too much about that. It's actually not that complicated once you learn. God knows, I was terrified of that when I was learning. Acoustic guitar backs are not one sheet of wood. They actually involve a highly precise jointing process. Like a butcher, us guitar makers require certain cuts of our own material to delegate different tasks to. And the cut of wood that we favour for guitar backs, guitar sides, guitar tops and guitar necks is quarter sawn. If you don't know what quarter sawn is, here's a very quick rundown. Basically, if you imagine a log, the quarter sawn cut comes from this portion of the log, so there's only a certain few cuts in the log that you can use as quarter sawn timber. You'll notice that the grain goes straight down on this particular cut of the log, providing you with a very straight grained plank. This means it's stiffer, more reliable, and when wood expands and contracts, it does so in tangent. Now, the benefits of the quarter sawn are also to do with the book match, which is essentially the quality of the mirroring that the timber displays visually. If you have a billet of quarter sawn timber and you cut along the line, open it up, it's going to be the same as the other piece, so that's what you use for the back. I also do have other videos about this, so please do go back and watch those if you're still confused. So let's get making the back. I'm going to do this joint and then I'm going to cut it to shape and then I'm going to get to work on the spruce bracing. As I mentioned, this bracing is spruce. That's because it's nice and lightweight, and actually even if you flick this timber, it's just so ready to make music. Very resonant, very beautiful tap tone. It's the perfect bracing material and the perfect material, in my opinion, for a guitar top. This spruce actually goes a bit further than just being your average spruce, and it is called moon spruce. Why is it called moon spruce? Well, as we know, the moon has an impact on many things in life, and trees, it turns out, are no different. In the beautiful alpine mountain climbs, these trees are grown, but they are only felled at the full moon. This is because the sap levels in the timber are actually lower during this part of the month. The lower sap levels equates to stiffer and drier timber, better for making music. Another beautifully magical thing to add to the story of this instrument, I think. Time to radius these braces in the same way that we did the rim assembly, by pushing them and sanding them into this 15-foot radius dish. That way, when we clamp the back itself will assume that 15-foot radius. First, we have to fit the braces to the back strip. Now the back strip is also spruce, just for the same reasons as I use spruce bracing. But one thing that's cool about the back strip is that it gives us an opportunity as craftspeople to use materials for their natural properties in clever ways. So obviously we jointed the back up, which provides a lengthwise joint. So what I've done is cut the timber on the side grain, meaning that it's going to provide a sort of cross-hatching support to that back joint. Pretty cool that nature offers different ways to support itself. And helpfully, it makes it a lot easier to chisel into when we're fitting those back braces into that back strip. Now I think it's time to talk about the other material that I'm very excited about regarding this build, which is the top. You may have seen a previous video where I tap tested this top. It had a sensational tap tone to it. That's right, I'm going to use the Smoky spruce for this build. So let's talk about the wood. Again, it's got a fabulous story to it. The Smoky Mountain Range is one of the most highly protected but most beautiful places in the USA. And quite rightly, you're not allowed to fell any trees or indeed remove any trees that have fallen from natural causes, at least until Hurricane Opal came. Hurricane Opal wended its way through the Smoky Mountain hills, and one of its victims was a tree. According to carbon dating, this tree had been well on its way to adulthood in the year 1588, which is a long time ago. So this was a seriously old growth tree, and it happened to be a spruce tree. In fact, the area which it had grown was only 15 centimeters deep in soil. Subsequently, the tree was forced to slow down, and the growth rings were strikingly tight. Usually us guitar makers believe that the tighter and slower the growth wood, the better it will perform as a musical instrument. Now usually it would have died in the place that it was born, but Hurricane Opal had other plans for it. Hurricane Opal pushed this tree into the middle of a public highway. I'd be sad, but I'm not. Two guys, John and Ted, managed to persuade the authorities to let them take this tree away, and they sold it into guitar making. Now, I received some of this wood as a gift from a supplier friend of mine, and I am so grateful that I got the chance to build with this wood because it is just not available anymore. I knew this was the perfect timber to use on the top for my very special commission. I actually studied a literature degree before I became a guitar maker, so I feel like books are a big part of me. And again, I love putting a little bit of my soul into my guitars. So my signature thing has become inlaying hand-marbled end papers into my guitars. Now, the end paper that I'm inlaying into this used to be on display in St. James's Street in London, in one of the world's most prestigious art gallery areas. Marbled in the 18th century by craftspeople there, they were reclaimed from old atlases and bought by a renowned art dealer. That art dealer donated his entire collection to me when he found out that I was a guitar maker. He'd never heard of the craft of instruments, and after I told him I'd experimented with end papers, he gave me this very old, very valuable collection to use in my guitars. Me and my client picked out our favourite and we used it to inlay the Rosette with. You'll now see me do that process, and I'm going to use copper as a nice motif around the outside of the sound hole and the inside, which will be nice when it catches the light. And I'm also going to suspend everything under crystal clear resin. Back braces require a little bit of fine tuning when they are glued up, and this is essentially a process of just being with it, listening to it make music and feeling it out. This is so experience based, so it's really hard to explain what I'm looking and feeling for, but I want it to be stiff enough that it's not going to break, but I also want it to have some flex so it can move in rhythm with the soundboard. So I'm just going to let you watch and then you can make your own conclusions. Now, the top bracing is a huge deal in the art of fine luthiery. As I mentioned when I was describing the structured sides, my guitar tops I see as the workhorse of the instrument. The way that I tune them, the way that I brace them, it all has a huge impact on the sound. And generally you can tell a handbuilt instrument versus a factory one by the way that the top is constructed. Factory ones will tend to overbuild their tops, overbrace them, and the sound will be compromised. I've cherry-picked my favourite ways of bracing a guitar top from my 2 apprenticeships, but also from the internet and books I've read around the subject. And of course, a lot of experimentation. I will spend days after I've glued the top on just making sure that I'm happy with every little crevice of that top. Sonically, aesthetically, every little detail I'm really particular about. But the most exciting bit when the voicing is over is that you can finally see this guitar as a soundbox. And a soundbox needs binding. Binding is the wood around the sides of the soundbox that protect it from being knocked and also provide a visual framing of the instrument. For this build, of course, I'm making them from scratch as usual, but I'm going to use ebony and flamed maple with some veneers involved as well, which give the materials of this build room to breathe with nothing pretentious or too flashy. The way we install the bindings is to route channels out around the edges of the instrument, bend the bindings to those channel shapes, and then install them using wood glue and tape. This part is one of my favourite parts of the build because it is very detailed. I'm going to install the end graft. The end graft's a lovely visual addition. It just frames the end of the instrument beautifully with a nice detailed inlay. It's a chance to get the miters out, it's a chance to do some fine woodworking just for craft's sake. The neck joint that I'm doing on this guitar is a mortise and tenon joint, so I need to route that out on the top, and then we're going to go ahead and route it out on the neck side of things as well. Setting the neck is really quite a difficult task because there are so many forces and angles at play. You've got to make sure the neck sits perfectly flush to the top of the guitar, but that it follows the exact desired angle that you want the neck. That will impact the ergonomics of your guitar and, of course, the sound. There is a lot of complicated mathematics when it comes to setting a neck angle, and although nobody takes to setting neck angles easily when you start guitar making, it is something that the more you do it, the easier it becomes to feel your way through what the instrument wants to do. I do a lot of this process by hand so I don't make any stupid mistakes, because your brain is considering a lot when you're doing this process. Onto the fretboard, guys. Now the fretboard has to be exact in its measurements, and if it's not, you're going to be in trouble when you string up the instrument. I'm using a table saw to slot my fret slots, and I'm going to use a template so that I know all of these fret slots are bang on. I created a very simple jig for this, which just meant that I can do fretboards accurately and quickly while prioritizing quality. Markers I thought were a really nice addition aesthetically, and they do help you locate where you are on the fretboard. I'm using brass tube here, and it just brings me so much joy when I inlay these. It's just a very simple low-key way of adding a bit of detail. Okay guys, time to start making the bridge. I like to do my bridge before I'm done with the instrument because I need to pin it on and mask around it before I do my spray finishing. I'll start by routing the most important part of the bridge, which is the saddle slot. It's finally time to mask everything up and take it to the spray booth. I use an acid catalyst lacquer. It's a high gloss finish, which means it's quite a challenging thing to apply, but there's something very healing about watching the layers build up and that wood starting to pop. I apply about 12 to 14 coats of this, which sounds like a lot, but actually that's what you need to make sure all of the pores are filled and that the finish is perfectly flat. A balloon is good for stopping the finish going inside the instrument, but it also means you can have a party at short notice. Now I have to leave the guitar for at least 10 days to dry before I can start buffing it to a high gloss. In this time, I will make a start on the fretwork. I do each fret individually by hand, and I follow a process which creates semi-hemispherical frets. Each little end is a semi-hemisphere. This of course takes a really long time, but my goodness, it feels so delightful when you play an instrument with these frets, in my opinion. That's why I like to do it. It's just another level of attention to detail. I have a compound radius that goes up the fretboard for playability, so I'll bend each fret according to its place on the fretboard as well. When I put the strings on this guitar for the first time, I got very emotional because although I filmed as much of it as I could, I really can't communicate to you via this medium how much of myself goes into every single one of these guitars. It's so many hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours, so much time in my own head, so much dedication to the thing that I'm producing. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't able to capture as much as I'd like around the end of this build because it was, frankly, quite emotional. The guitar was finished when I booked my flight to Florida to meet my client and deliver this guitar in person. I just had to set up the guitar using the rough saddle and nut blanks that I'd prepared earlier for this guitar. And once I'd polished them up, set the instrument up beautifully and polished around every single edge that I could think of, I was feeling very nervous to say the least, but very fulfilled and very grateful. Subsequently, the sound demo that I'm going to show you of this guitar is going to be in my hotel room the day that I dropped this instrument off. This guitar wasn't about playing it at the end, it was about building it. It was about all of the experiences that made that guitar. And my client is the one who should enjoy it and play it. It's 5 in the morning. But today I'm going to drop the guitar that I've been filming off in Florida. So let's go. I've got this microphone here. So I'm going to put this up here. And then I'll try and capture what I can hear. But the city is loud. This kind of feels like it's the best we're going to get. Let's give it a go. Time to go. Time to go. It's starting to rain.
Hi, welcome. Nice to meet you. We are. Which project is upstairs? Oh my goodness. That is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you so much.
Wow. Goodness, look how that wood turned out. Right, and I hear her voice all the time when I watch her videos, and she's right here in your house. Pretty crazy.
Very stable humidity.
Oh.
Keep this environment sort of
Yes.
fairly, yeah, and I can feel that, especially coming from outside.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. But I think it's a great size.
Oh, good.
Well, I wish everybody could see it in person. All my friends and family will, but I wish your audience could, because it would blow their mind.
That's very kind.
It's stunning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Interesting.
It's been such a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to create something that's beautiful.
This is the most exciting thing in a long time. Very cool.
This project should be dedicated to my client who now owns this guitar, because he was the one who made it possible. He was very gracious with the time he allowed me to complete the instrument, and very gracious with his patronage of me. I want to thank my dealer, the Rob Report, who made this commission possible. And I also want to thank each and every one of you for supporting this channel, watching me, showing up, and being you. That's so cliche, but I mean it. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna go take a bath.